Today, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford testified to the Senate about the allegations of sexual assault against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. Coming into this hearing today, President Trump's aides desperately tried to restrain him and prevent him from attacking Dr. Ford, but Trump very quickly dispensed with that advice and went on the offensive. In fact, Trump was apparently so frustrated by the growing crisis around his nominee that he decided to take matters into his own hands.
President Trump is not only still standing by Judge Brett Kavanaugh, but tonight he's taking the reins of defending the embattled Supreme Court nominee. He's grown increasingly dissatisfied with how Kavanaugh has defended himself, CNN has learned.
The president believes on the eve of this hearing in the Senate that he and he alone can put the best spin on this, that he can defend his nominee.
Oh, good. Trump is taking charge now. That's like if your computer froze and your grandpa was like, "Let me see that thing. You probably just need more water in the keyboard." That's why Trump held his insane press conference yesterday. He actually thought he was helping when, for example, he went off on an insane and totally unrelated tangent about how the Chinese think he's smart.
If you look at Mr. Pillsbury, the leading authority on China, he was on a good show, I won't mention the name of the show, recently, and he was saying that China has total respect for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's very, very large brain.
I'm sorry? Why is he doing a bad Italian accent? Is he quoting an expert on China or Super Mario? It's me, Mario. And Donald Trump has a large brain. Also, I think he's quoting someone he saw on cable news named Mr. Pillsbury, but I also feel like there's a decent chance he just saw a commercial with the Pillsbury Doughboy, and then he hallucinated that it was talking to him.
You have a very, very large brain.
Thank you, Mr. Pillsbury, for your kind words and your delicious biscuits. In fact, Trump's frantic, paranoid attempt to defend his embattled Supreme Court nominee from sexual assault allegations led him to a truly crazy place. Somehow, he found a way to drag George Washington into his mess.
Look, if we brought George Washington here and we said we have George Washington, the Democrats would vote against him, just so you understand.
I mean, does he still own slaves? Then, yeah, Democrats would vote against him, and Republicans would probably say, "Hey, man, everybody owned a few slaves in college. You want to ruin his life over it?" But Trump actually kept going because then he seemed to imply that George Washington had something nefarious in his background that we don't know about.
And he may have had a bad past, who knows, you know. He may have had some, I think, accusations made. Didn't he have a couple of things in his past?
Wait, did Trump just imply that George Washington was as shady as he is? I hear he chopped down a cherry tree and then he used that tree to pay off a porn star. Only Trump would try to defend himself by slandering another president. So what if I cheated on my wife? Abraham Lincoln left his wife right in the middle of a play. What? What happened? Oh, okay, I didn't read the whole book. So Trump and Republicans had already made clear that their intent was to protect Kavanaugh and dismiss Dr. Ford. And in the hearing today, Republicans picked up right where Trump left off. Before Dr. Ford even uttered a single word, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley delivered an exhausting monologue defending Kavanaugh and slamming Democrats. And then, after ranting for almost 15 minutes, Senator Grassley finally turned the mic over to the senior Democrat on the committee, Dianne Feinstein, only to interrupt her 1 minute later.
Before you get to your testimony, and the chairman chose not to do this, I think it's important to make sure you're properly introduced.
By the way, I was going to introduce her, but if you want to introduce her, I'll be glad to have you do that. But I want you to know I didn't forget to do it because I would do that just as she was about to speak.
You said I didn't do it, but I'm going to do it. And then you did it, and now I can't do it because it's done. Dude, shut up. Your time is up. You don't get to pop up out of your coffin whenever you want, like the Crypt Keeper. You did it! I was gonna do it! Edgar did it. And yet, the Republicans' constant sniping and their obvious attempts to obstruct the process and brush Ford aside did not deter her in any way. Her testimony today was a towering act of courage given the trauma she survived. Her grace and composure under unimaginable pressure, which she owed no one, was stunning. In fact, at one point, Dr. Ford, a research psychologist, literally explained to the panel how memory works.
How are you so sure that it was he?
The same way that I'm sure that I'm talking to you right now. It's just basic memory functions, and also just the level of norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain that sort of, as you know, encodes, that neurotransmitter encodes memories into the hippocampus.
She's in the middle of testifying in the intense glare of the national spotlight about an alleged sexual assault committed by a Supreme Court nominee, and she just taught everyone how the brain works. She gave a detailed anatomy of the hippocampus and the memory centers in the brain to a room full of guys who look like they eat brains. But seriously, just think about how impressive that is. She's a research psychologist explaining how the mind works in the middle of a horrific experience that no one should ever have to endure. Meanwhile, the most coherent thing Trump has ever said about the mind is that he has a
Very, very large brain.
In fact, throughout the hearing, Republicans really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to try to discredit Dr. Ford. At one point, the prosecutor Republicans picked went down a confusing line of questioning about Dr. Ford's fear of flying. Republicans have also spent weeks falsely implying that Dr. Ford was missing key facts in her story, but throughout this hearing, it became clear that they were the ones who had basic facts wrong, like when they asked her about her travel to Australia.
In fact, you fly fairly frequently for your hobbies, and you've had to fly for your work. Is that true?
Correct, unfortunately.
You were a consulting biostatistician in Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
I've never been to Australia, but the company that I worked for is based in Australia.
You said you flew to Australia to eat dinner? No, I said I went to an Outback Steakhouse. And if you thought the Republican attacks couldn't get any dumber and more desperate, you were wrong, because you forgot that there's a second Donald Trump. And he chimed in on Twitter after the airplane question to say this: "I'm no psychology professor, but it does seem weird to me that someone could have a selective fear of flying." Oh, you're not a psychology professor? Is that why you look like a princess kissed a double-parked BMW and it came to life? Well, Dr. Ford literally is a psychology professor. You melted down Beavis. Dr. Ford's testimony was so searing and so powerful and so impressive that Republicans were clearly caught off guard. In fact, even Fox News, the network that spends all day parroting Republican talking points, said Dr. Ford's testimony was bad for the GOP.
The court of public opinion, if our colleagues is an adequate sample of it, is that she is extremely credible. The president cannot be happy with this.
This was extremely emotional, extremely raw, and extremely credible. This is a disaster for the Republicans.
Wow, you know it's bad when Fox News calls it a disaster. Fox News will say anything to make Republicans feel better. If the Hindenburg had been built by Republicans, the Fox News headline would have been this. And when it was Kavanaugh's turn, he struck a much different tone from his Fox News interview earlier this week. He was angry, defiant, and stole a page out of Trump's playbook by claiming with zero evidence that the allegations were part of a left-wing conspiracy to destroy him.
Since my nomination in July, there's been a frenzy on the left to come up with something, anything, to block my confirmation, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons.
Holy I'm surprised he didn't start attacking George Washington. If he's so honest, then why does he wear a wig? You think this was a revenge plot by the Clintons? That's insane. Republicans always act like they're in a slasher film and the killer around every corner is Hillary Clinton. Republicans came into this hearing clearly trying to dismiss and discredit Dr. Ford, and instead they encountered someone whose immeasurable courage shone through their attempts to obstruct. What we've seen this week is a group of powerful men trying to protect each other from the consequences of their actions, and a woman who not only told her story with unimaginable bravery, but also showed everyone that she has a very large
A brain.
This has been a closer look.